So we're going to shift gears now, and we're going to talk a little bit about water and water innovation. Colorado and CSU are at the forefront in the development of new technology to address water concerns. How often have we heard necessity is the mother of all invention, right? And here we are. We've heard all about the importance of water shortage, particularly in our lifetime, and a lot of innovation is bubbling up, some of which you're going to hear about right now. So I am excited to introduce a fellow journalist who has been executive editor at Fortune for 25 years. I have a lot of good friends and colleagues over there, including the editor who I've worked with for years. He is also an author, if you're not aware, with some folks you maybe never heard of, including Alan Greenspan, maybe General Norman Schwarzkopf, among others. So he's a phenomenal journalist, and he is tasked today with doing something distinctly unique, and I'm going to let Peter Petry explain it to you, but you're going to see two panels in action at once. So without further ado, let me turn it over now to Peter.
Thank you. Okay, well, while my many panelists file up, if you all would like to just stand up for a minute and get your blood flowing, you can. You don't have to, but so, do we have everybody? Yeah, just, so I would say panel to that side and firing line to this side, okay? Do we have enough? I'm not sure. Yeah, that sounds right. Okay, good. Are we It's the other way. Okay, well, let's move one chair over. No, we'll do it. There we go. Okay, we've found our seats. Now you can find yours, please. That was such a nice introduction. Thank you so much. What was left out was that on this subject, I'm sort of a fish out of water. This is new to me, and it's incredibly exciting to interact with all of our experts here. The number of people on the stage it means two things. One is that we've got kind of a unique setup where we've got on one side panelists, and on the other side something we call the firing line, which is not to be confused with a firing squad. But the idea is that after our panelists talk a little bit, the firing line guys who know a lot about what these guys do are going to ask them challenging questions. And then toward the very end of the process, I'll bring you all in to ask even more challenging questions. So what I'm going to do, just to try to set the stage in kind of a clumsy way, because I don't know much about water, is to set the broad parameters of the discussion. And there was a great lead-in for this, of course, from the governor, who talked about water. Also from the talent discussion that we just listened to, because the real answer to why there's so much talent here is that it's in the water, of course. Okay, so the water overview. The reason why water is such a contentious issue and so important for agriculture, its biggest user in this state, is that there are so incredibly many factors and so much history entangled in it. But basically the issue is something that we all understand, which is that there is increasing demand for a limited resource. Increasing demand comes from increasing population, increasing need from the oil and gas industry, increasing needs downstream from the states downstream from Colorado that depend on the water that flows from the headwater state. And there's also the lurking problem that there's something I've just been told about today called over-allocation, which means that in certain climate conditions, something like 150% of Colorado's water is already committed, and that could lead to problems. There are certain limitations and pressures that I've learned about in the last day. One of them, of course, is environmental concerns, conservation. Another is the increasing effect of climate variability, which we've heard talked about many times this morning. Droughts, increasing weather extremes. There's also something which fascinates me, the inherited legal framework for administering water in the state of Colorado, which sounds to me quite unique and fascinating. And then there are the wild cards. Besides climate change, there's the thing we've been hearing about for this whole conference, which is technology change. And you know there's an enormous amount of new technology out there for water handling, water treatment. 80% of it won't work, 20% of it will change the world, but we don't know which is the 20%, and it costs money to try, and it's risky. And then finally, there are all of these strange influxes of money into the water world. Oil companies are here waving around lots of money, lots more than farmers can afford to pay for their water. I just heard today that major foundations like Bechtel and the Hewlett Foundation and even Walmart's foundation are very interested in pumping money into the water realm because it's so important to such a big part of our country. So put all that together, and that's why we can have 9 people on the stage and not even begin to scratch the surface of the subject. So to give you an illustration of how wonderfully complex the subject is, I'm just going to ask our panelists to briefly introduce themselves one at a time because you'll get a sense of the spectrum here. So let me start way on the left here. John, are you on?
Hello. Oh,
There
there
you
we
are.
go.
Okay, there he is. John
Good
Stolp.
afternoon. My name's John Stolp. I'm a special policy advisor to Governor Hickenlooper on water, and I'm also the director for the Interbasin Compact Committee.
Hi, I'm Dave Stewart. I own Stewart Environmental Consultants here in Fort Collins and do a lot of process work with water, so it's water and technology.
Good morning or afternoon. Dave Soldowski. I'm with Fresno State University out in California, and we do a lot of irrigation technology evaluation and research.
Hi, Zach Sigmund from Silver Bullet Water Treatment. We are a Denver-based firm that manufactures a non-toxic, non-chemical-based water treatment system for a variety of applications.
Good afternoon. My name's Brad Udall. I'm a senior water and climate research scientist and scholar, of which 3 words are at least true: water, climate, and unfortunately senior. And I get to work with Reagan Wascom at the Colorado Water Institute.
Oh, yes, introduce yourselves, please.
Afternoon. My name is Reagan Wascom, and I work at the Colorado Water Institute here at CSU.
I'm Tim Gates. I'm in the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department here at CSU.
Hi, I'm Jim Yon. I'm a graduate of CSU, Ag Engineering graduate. I manage the North Sterling and Pruitt reservoirs up by Sterling, and then I also sit on the Interbasin Compact Committee, which John is the head of.
My name is Stephen Smith. I'm an agricultural engineer, graduate of CSU, and a farmer.
Okay, so what you've just heard is we've got before us innovators, we've got at least one water guru here, and you can guess who he is. We've got thought leaders, and we've got people who are hands-on integrators and managers of water resources. So I'm going to ask a general question to the panel, which is that in that rather clumsy summary I gave of the world of water in Colorado, what did I miss? What did I screw up? What do you want to emphasize? What should we be focusing on right now?
So I guess I've got the mic, so I get to start. What is it? Possession 9/10 of the law.
Is that how water works?
It is, actually. So my area of expertise is climate change, and I've worked on it for the last 10 years. I've been a party to the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and U.S. national assessments on climate change. And climate change is effectively water change. I mean, that's the message. The biggest impact of climate change is in water, and we are seeing it right now. Anybody out there feel like this has been a weird winter in Colorado? Anybody want to join me in that? A few hands show up. I was here on the 26th. It was 75 Fahrenheit. We think February in Boulder was both the warmest and the snowiest month ever there. This is a prelude to the future, and we're going to get to deal with it, and it's going to affect our agricultural systems in major, major ways.
Just to be brief, the biggest sector I'd be concerned in is just efficiency improvements, improving the way we do things, being smarter about what we do, and I think that pretty much speaks for itself.
And I would just add, I mean, we're going to see a highly variable climate, I think, highly variable stock market. I mean, our place you look, variability in our lives is getting wilder. But data is going to drive this thing, and we got to collect data, and it's got to be good and meaningful data.
Probably the only other thing that I would say, Peter, is that you have the overlay of energy and industrial concerns that previously we would go to ag to go get water. I don't think we're going to be able to do that in the future. So we got to figure out how to get different sources of water, like brackish water.
I would say the one thing that concerns me is our population growth. That's one of those demands that we talk about, and we're such a great place to live. We're going to double our population at some point. Half of that increase will be from our own children, their children, and grandchildren. And because it's a popular place to live, we're going to attract other people come here looking for jobs, and 5 million more people will have to learn how to live smarter, probably with less water per capita. At the same time, have a sustainable, viable agriculture that can produce the food and the other enhancements of landscapes and clean air and opportunity for recreation that agriculture oftentimes provides in addition to the water resource.
Well, John, keep the mic for a minute, but you've touched on something that one of you folks told me earlier today that really struck me, is that the recent experiences with drought and the consumer response to drought has revealed that people are very responsive to water pressure, pressures on the supply, and that people in households will spontaneously cut back their use of water, which is kind of a nice thing to know, that it doesn't always have to be visited on people, but it's a way that people respond. But the reason I asked you to keep the mic is you also gave some wonderful historical background to what got us here with water today, talking both about Elwood Mead and his scheme for allocating water, and then just this last 10-year process of moving toward the Colorado Water Plan. So I wonder, could you just briefly recap both of those?
Well, there's nothing like a drought to get your attention if you're in the water business. And the drought of 2002 and 2003 certainly got the state's attention that we need to have a broader conversation about water. And the legislature in their wisdom created the Basin Roundtables, the IBCC, to have this, initiate this conversation at a fairly grassroots, ground level, in order to help inform and better inform ourselves as to what we need to be doing in agriculture as well as in the water community. And out of these roundtables, I made the comment earlier today, we found that some people had never met unless together within their own basin, unless they were in the courtroom and they were suing each other. And at least with this process, we've learned how to communicate, collaborate, and discuss the issues that are common to us, and find out we don't have that many differences. And while we do have differences, we've seen the benefits of collaboration, relationship building, not only within the basins, but then also as basins talk to other basins and educate each other on what their interests are. Thus the IBCC, the Interbasin Compact Committee, and then we've 27 of us that sat there and supposedly put on our statewide perspective hats. Out of this group, we advised the Water Conservation Board, who's the policy making and holds the purse strings to water funding in Colorado. And they oftentimes sat with us at the IBCC, and we've been working collaboratively on the Colorado Water Plan that the governor said after 7 or 8 years it's time to put this together into a draft plan, which we produced, and it's online at coloradowaterplan.com. The governor started looking at it in December. We have 1 more year until we owe him a final product, but which will never really be final if we do it right, because we will continue to add to and improve water plan. But the main tenets of it are to bring people together in a collaborative, cooperative way that we can make smarter decisions in water planning for the future.
Okay, well, thank you. Firing line, I'm going to ask you to gear up now. I wonder if maybe Jim would like to pitch the first question.
Sure, I'd be glad to. No, John, you might as well keep the mic. I have a question for you. You know, you were the former Commissioner of Agriculture. You're a rancher and a farmer, even though it was a dry land farmer, and you're the governor's water advisor now. And I just wanted to know, you know, how do you see, or what would you say that agriculture will look like, especially in over-appropriated basins like the South Platte and the Arkansas, if we continue developing Colorado as we have in the past?
Great question. I'm reminded of a conversation I had with Harris Sherman about 9-10 years ago. And he was the director of the Department of Natural Resources, and he'd pulled together some colleagues of his in the water community, and he said, what's Eastern Colorado going to look like in 50 years? And to a person they said, dry. And he was talking about the ag water resources. And so I think that was following on the heels of the drought, 02 and 3. And so I think it called to attention why we need to have this conversation. And I was asked this question just a couple of weeks ago at the Central Water annual meeting, and they wanted to know what I thought the future would look like in agriculture. And I think it will look different than it does today, and it will be different than what it was in our fathers and our grandfathers' times. We will have access to better knowledge, better technology than we have today, and we will have to meet these demands through a whole variety. There's no one silver bullet, but we're going to have to meet the demands of a growing population, at the same time maintain a quality of life that we revere here in Colorado. And we only do that as we collaborate, cooperate, and learn how to share water better within our prior appropriation system. And I think it can be done. I go back to the time that the historians tell us the Anasazi Indians left Colorado because they ran out of water. And their technology wasn't what we have today. And if we'd have told that chief that let him out of Colorado that, you know, there's going to be 5 million of us in 2015 and there'll be another 5 million by 2050, he'd said, you're crazy, and continue to leave. But we have this kind of population. We have the opportunity to collaborate, cooperate, use technology to make it possible that Colorado still has a high quality of life, we still have viable agriculture, and we can still have growing communities.
John, hang on to the mic for a second. So
you can't just pick on
yeah, I
John.
know. I'll let the others jump in. But John, the water plan acknowledges a large gap. It acknowledges a lot of loss of agricultural land if we don't change the path we're on. And yet, many of us, when we read the water plan, it looks like business as usual. There's very little about technology and innovation in the water plan. Why is that, and what do we need to change in the final version?
Good question. I would disagree slightly in that I think embedded in a lot of the conservation savings and opportunities we've seen around municipal water supply, there's an element of new innovation, new technology, of water efficient fixtures in the homes as well as outside watering. In agriculture, I think, you know, CSU, Land Grant Institution, your shop has been doing a lot of things in the innovative arena. And I would remind everybody that this is a draft, and it's a draft, and I think James Eklund refers to it as kind of an open source type of draft, that it's online. You can go online personally with your organization, and you can add comments that you think would make this plan more relevant, and I encourage you to do that, because the last thing we want to, while there has to be leadership at the top, and Governor Hickenlooper has provided that, there has to be grassroots level input into it to make it meaningful, so we all have some buy-in to it and some ownership. And it's a document that I think will continue to be dynamic, and we do need to reach out, and we do need to fund innovation to the extent we can. Agriculture is looking for it. Municipal providers are looking for it. I had dinner last night with some people from Denver Water, and they attribute part of this savings to that technology over the last 10 years that we didn't have 10, 15 years ago. And they're looking at taking indoor water consumption down to like 30 gallons per capita in the next 10 to 20 years. And based on what they have an expectation of future innovation and future technology that they may not even know about today. And so that's why I'm optimistic about what the future looks like of our municipal folks being able to reduce their footprint somewhat, and ag being able to be more efficient, so we can all continue to use this water. That our water source is not going to increase greatly. It may, because what Brad just said, actually diminish for these 10 million people.
Peter, can I ask a question there on the technology side? This is directed to David Zoldowski. David's the director of the Center for Irrigation Technology in Fresno, and there's kind of an irony in the technology we have available to us in irrigation, and that irony is that we have highly efficient systems, pressurized irrigation systems, often fully automated. But there's an irony when those systems are implemented. If you look at the basin-wide strategy, can you just tell us about that, please?
Sure. No, so I'll just ask a question to the group. Who in here believes that plants use less water with drip irrigation? Does anybody believe that? Yes, no? It's a bit of a trick question because plants actually use more with drip irrigation, and that's because they're well watered, irrigated every day in many cases. So what happens is that there's this idea that if I go from, and I'll just pick a number, 50% flood to a 90% efficient drip system, that we were saving 40% of the water. But what I suggest to you, particularly in basins where surface water is brought in and is also conjunctive use dependent on groundwater, that extra water that goes below the root zone due to inefficiency actually recharges the groundwater. So as we move to more and more efficient systems, if that is on-farm, and that's the distinction between on-farm efficiency and then basin-wide, the collective recharge of the basin is dependent in many cases on the inefficient irrigation method. So with that, obviously, there is degradation of groundwater. That's not a good thing, and the energy to pump it back up. So as we think about improving on-farm irrigation efficiencies, what I think we all agree we need to, and to increase the yields associated with that, and certainly DRIP and pivots provide that to us, where appropriate, we need to look and make sure that that we have groundwater recharge as part of that bigger effort, because otherwise you're simply taking away from that groundwater and transferring that water someplace else. And so that water's already accounted for in that basin for those growers or for that municipality. So I think it's that catch-22, and just be aware of what you're doing when you do it, I guess. And there is no new water. I guess that's the real message. There's very few places where we have true water savings that's new water that nobody else has claimed or used, and that's probably the real take-home message. So just take a real deep dive look at what's going on, and then make your decisions accordingly.
So for Dave Stewart, if there's any new water, locally at least, it's probably brackish groundwater, produced water, marginal waters, reusable effluents, et cetera. We know those sources are there, yet the adoption of the technology that already exists seems to be really lagging. What's missing, Dave? How do we move this thing forward and get those waters used and in the system?
Well, that's a good question. Right now, we do a lot of work in the oil and gas industry on produced water and frac flowback. And what we find is that recycling of that water is only about 1% to 2%, maybe 5%. Every energy company has a goal of 100% reuse, but it's not even approaching that yet. The technology's there. The industry actually has probably the only industrial group that has the money to be able to finance that. So they think nothing of paying 50 cents a barrel to $1 a barrel for water, which is equivalent to $3,500 to $7,000 an acre foot, per acre foot. So
And
when
what's a
you're trying
typical acre foot cost that you would expect?
so if I'm Jim, I want it for $50 an acre foot.
15.
15, okay, yeah. So I knew it was down there, but so the energy companies can afford that water, and I think that, and when you combine that with brackish water, you know, we have a lot of brackish water in Colorado. This is water that has a TDS of 3,000 to 30,000, and it exists. It's at a fairly reasonable level. It's 500 to 1,500 feet deep. We can go and treat that. We know how to treat it now. We can treat it very inexpensively, about $300 to $400 an acre foot. You have to get your capital back, so there's parts of that. But I think overall what we're going to see is this water quality shift. We're going to see fresh water being used in certain cases in certain areas, and you're going to see impaired waters being used differently. But we got to use it all.
So that sounds like you're talking about a pretty fundamental change in what water is considered usable.
Absolutely.
Throughout the
Yeah,
economy.
if I'd come to a farmer 5 years ago and said, I want to tackle your brackish water, they would have said, have at it, because they give it no value. In reality, that if you're going to use that for oil and gas, it's going to cost you 20 cents a barrel to treat it, 5 cents a barrel to bring it to the surface, and you sell it for $1. So that water has a tremendous value.
Another income stream for your
Absolutely.
farm.
It's that mailbox money showing up again.
David,
Well-
I just
No, please.
have a question. Earlier, I talked about, with our reservoir storage, sometimes there's oil and gas industries that come to us and want some water for production of oil. And we look at it as an income stream where we can maybe increase our innovation or do some improvements on our system or whatever. So we look at it as a source of income where maybe some others would look at it as, well, they're taking water away from agriculture. So I just want to know what you might comment on that.
Actually, I think it has to be a portfolio of water rights. The energy company actually needs both kind. When I inject an acre foot of water, so every well that I frack, it takes me 3 to 5 acre feet to do it. So like Northern Colorado Water Conservancy District is limiting the amount of water that can go to a well pad. Out of a well pad, I'm going to do anywhere from 8 to 12 to 15 wells. And so they're going to limit per well pad 10 acre feet. That's going to require energy companies to start looking at recycling. And it's going to put on to the notice that you have to be able to really put that portfolio together to say, what's the best use of this water? And fresh water is, in my opinion, because when I put it down in the well, I get half of it back. So now I've lost a half acre foot, and I'm not going to get that back. And so we have to really think about that. The converse to that is we go out and permit all kinds of saltwater injection wells in Weld County. So there are about 15 of those operating out there right now. And every day they're putting in 10,000 to 20,000, each well is putting in 10 to 20,000 barrels a day. So when you start looking at that, I mean, you're putting down 5 acre feet a day into the ground that you'll never get it back. I mean, that's going down 10,000 feet. So I think we just got to encourage them. In Texas, what they do is they require that as part of the overall management of the well pad. So recycling has become an integral part to their overall water management for the oil and gas industry.
So the technology is there. Well, let me ask you a broader question, because having been propagandized in the religion of the market at Fortune magazine for many years, there are so many factors at play here. Why not just let the market decide? If an oil company can come along and pay more for water in your reservoir, why wouldn't you sell it to them?
Because I think it becomes a short-sighted. I mean, if oil's trading at $25 a barrel, nobody's going to be buying any water. If oil is trading at $200 a barrel, they're going to be drilling like mad.
And there'll be nothing to drink, right?
So and I think Reagan said it best this morning. He said, "Water is a public good," and that is a very true statement. It's a resource that we have to manage and protect, and because if we screw it up, we lose it, and there's only so much of it on the planet, so we have to be real careful about that.
Peter, could I ask a question? I'd like to go back to this issue related to increased irrigation efficiency, maybe for Dave since he brought it up, but I'm sure others of you may have thoughts about this. One of the things we've learned through the years here in Colorado is that by increasing irrigation efficiency, reducing over-irrigation on farms as well as reducing seepage losses from canals, there can be some reduction in non-beneficial water consumption, especially when you have really high groundwater tables that are spread out under land that's not irrigated. And so you're actually consuming water by upflux from those shallow groundwater tables. And so by lowering the water table, you can reduce that non-beneficial consumption. But maybe more importantly, we've discovered that this excess water that goes down to the groundwater and eventually returns back to the stream, in that path back to the streams dissolves a lot of material, various salts, as well as other minerals like selenium and uranium that are now polluting our waterways. And we think that boosting efficiency can result in marked increases in water quality in the stream system. But we face a problem here in Colorado related to our water laws, as well as maybe more importantly, the compacts that we've entered into with states downstream. When we go in and we increase efficiency, it changes the patterns of the return flows back to the streams. And so we face this dilemma of how do we do this and still meet our in-state, water law requirements, as well as comply with these interstate compacts. So I'm curious about thoughts that any of you may have, Dave, as well as others, about how do we promote what we think would be beneficial through efficiency, but at the same time be able to meet these legal requirements, these policy requirements that we have.
May I jump in? Are they just legal requirements, or are there environmental ramifications that have developed over time with these now traditional ways that the water flows back in?
Well, there can be that as well. The environmental benefit is through the improved water quality, which we think is a valuable target to try to achieve. But there's another question, I think maybe one of the people here might want to address that too, and that's related to wetlands. When you produce wetlands due to return flows and you alter the return flow patterns, it could affect those as well. But my question was...
you mean all the critters that live in the wetlands now,
Exactly.
which weren't there in the first
Yes.
place 100 years ago, but
Right.
now they're there.
Right.
And you don't want to just kick those critters off the wetlands.
That can happen too.
Oh.
So.
Well, I think the short answer is we want to apply the water as uniform as we can and apply the amount and the timing that the crop needs. And so I think we optimize that and then sort of look for the externalities. Where has that water in the past been going, and how can we get it there in a way that preserves the water quality or the water temperature and timing and amount and all those kind of things. So I think what it does is gives us a more highly probably engineered system, right? I mean, that's where we're headed. But it really starts off with data at the farm, and I was going to just touch on that a bit. We at least, California, I can tell you, water meters are a rarity. Everybody would look and say that's crazy, but it's in fact true. Maybe 20% of all the irrigation systems in California have water meters. It's just been a culture that you run it till you think you got enough, and then you run it a little longer, and then you turn it off. So I think we got to get the data, and we have the data, we can manage it, and then it's really about an integrated system. And I think that's what we're more holistic approach. So it's not just about on farm; it's about all these other externalities. But if we can do a good job on the farm, that will free up opportunities to move water around and at better timing and better quality to help all other concerns. So I think there's a net benefit across for everyone.
I was just going to touch on that because I noticed in our system, which when I started there 23 years ago, we were about 10 to 15% sprinkler irrigated, and it was high pressure sprinklers. Now we've switched to low pressure drop nozzle sprinklers, but we're kind of on rolling hills, and when we flood irrigated, what people would call wasted a lot of water, and now we don't see that because now we're 80% center pivot sprinkler irrigated, and so we've become a lot more efficient in ours, but as a whole on the South Platte, people down below us don't see the wastewater, they don't see their water right anymore that they used to have. So I was just wondering, because you mentioned, well, on the South Platte anyway, I just like to use this little statistic. We have about 1.4 million acre feet of natural supply. We get about 400,000 acre feet from the western slope, so it's a trans-basin diversion. So we have a total supply on average of about 1.8 million acre feet, but we divert 2.2 million acre feet every year surface flow. We divert 450,000 from the groundwater. So we divert 2.6 million acre feet, and we have a supply of 1.8 million acre feet. To a lot of people, that doesn't make any sense, but it's all on what I just said is return flows that people call it waste, but I'm dependent. When you flush the toilet here, that's part of my water right, and I appreciate it. So
Flush it twice.
I know, but yeah. But I was looking at these toilets here, and they're 88% more efficient, and it really ticked me off. But but anyway, we depend on that. So, but I was wondering, because you made a comment earlier in the day about it makes you kind of develop a system that's in balance, and then you do some things differently, and because a system is over allocated, it becomes brittle. And I was just, what are some things that you see in California with that happening?
Well, absolutely. We just south of Fresno, where I live, is the raisin capital of the world, and it's a very sandy area because they lay grapes out to dry. And there used to be a flood district. Water came every 2 weeks. Surface water rights, junior water rights. So every third or fourth year, they'd get a big slug of water. They'd recharge the groundwater, and the rest of the time they're on wells. Well, to do the right thing, they've gone all to drip, and now because you're on a drip system, you have to irrigate every day. The flood water is no longer available. They can't take it through the drip system, and so they're no longer recharging. They're actually the district's putting themselves out of business because they did the right thing. So it wasn't thought through all the way. The same thing off the San Joaquin River, south of Fresno there, where the water's diverted. There's 2 water districts that are bookends to one in the middle that's wholly dependent on groundwater, and the 70,000 acre feet of its water come through unintentional groundwater exchange from the 2 districts either side using surface water that are inefficient. So it's fine to say, hey, we're going to take that water, leave it back in the river. Just understand, in that case, the Pixley Irrigation District and the community that has developed over there the last 50, 60 years is gone. The base is gone because the water will soon dry up. So again, it's about third-party impacts, and just understand what we do when we do. Because I just think that all this wasted water is being allocated or being utilized by someone else, and the system is fairly resilient at that level. And so we just have to be careful that we take this water here. Who have we impacted downstream?
Zach, as the sole millennial on the panel, you're going to inherit all this. So, but I'd like to ask a more directed question. You've got an innovative technology, actually a prize-winning technology, that addresses certain problems of wastewater. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how difficult it is to get that into the marketplace and what your experience has been.
Yeah, so like with any new technology, the first thing someone says and you walk in and present it to them is, well, there's no way that can work. So that honestly is the biggest obstacle we face and anyone else in our space faces. And you constantly have to resell your product every time. You have numerous successful, happy clients, but everybody wants to see 6 months of results before they're committed to pay or anything like that, which we see pretty regularly. Another issue is just the people don't want to mess with a system that works or they perceive already works. So particularly on the power generation side, I mean, outside of agriculture, power generation is the second largest consumer of water in Colorado and nationally. It uses some 40% of our fresh water on a daily basis. And primarily that's through wasted water, through inefficient, old, outdated systems where there just isn't the care to improve said system. It works, the plant works, you get power out of it. Why do we care about water getting out of it? We can afford to buy it from Jim, so why would we bother save it? I do think as a result of a lot of the drought and significant extreme weather events we've been having, that has done a bit of a shift in the mindset of people where they're not looking at water savings from a financial gain, but it's more of a social gain and a social responsibility even. So I do see that tide shifting, but the biggest barrier is just convincing people that it does what you know it can do.
And to stake the money on it.
And to put it on the line. Agreed.
Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry.
So, Brad, I wanted to ask you a question. In your opening remarks, you mentioned that you think that climate change is going to further constrain our water supply. And you didn't mention agricultural productivity in that as well, but I think you meant that when you said that. But this conference is really about innovation, I guess, as you've listened today. What have you heard that where do we go in terms of innovation around climate change for water and ag? And is this just about widgets and technology, or are there institutional and policy innovations that we're going to need to get us where we're going?
Yeah, so great question. Would love to have 45 minutes to answer it. I'll see what I can do in about 2. I think so what we have right now is 19th century water law meets 20th century infrastructure, meets 21st century population and climate change. I mean, that's what we have. That's your intro.
That sounds very balanced to me.
And so which portions of that are you going to change to make a difference? I don't think we're going to change that much on the infrastructure side. I mean, we will build a few new reservoirs, but the scope of the problem, we've got 2,000 already in this state, 75 big ones. The scope of the problem is such that we can't build our way out of this. And when you then go back to my equation, what else do you have what other levers do you have to work on? And the lever I'd work on is this 19th century water law that basically encourages people to waste water. I mean, that's effectively what it does. And what I would love to see is a system that changes water from this very special input that people want to maximize because our water law tells us that's the best thing you can do to protect your right, to an input that looks like any other input that a farmer uses. And that means you optimize it. So you take some of it and you grow a crop, and you may decide that summer, by gosh, Denver needs a chunk of this water, and so I'm going to deficit irrigate my crop, or I'm going to plant something else, and I'm going to make out like a bandit with that increment I don't use. That's the kind of flexibility we need in this system. And I know it's very different than what ag has been used to in the past, but the alternative in my game is that ag gets run over by these cities. And so if you're going to have a productive ag economy, we got to get out of the zero-sum game nature of water, and how humans have historically done this is go back to markets. Markets help us allocate resources effectively, and we've got to be able to somehow get there while protecting this prior appropriation doctrine that's important because it's private property rights. But what we have right now, our whole system just encourages waste.
Yeah, I might push back just a little bit there, but
Well, push. Go ahead.
because we really, I mean, we do look at it as a private property right, and even within our system, we're allowed to innovate some within our water court system. So we've, like for what we've done on the North Sterling Irrigation District, we entered into an interruptible supply agreement with Public Service Company and their brush power plants.
So I'm not suggesting anything other than voluntary transactions here. If a farmer wants to go farm water, he can do it, and if he wants to grow alfalfa, he can do that too.
Right.
She can do it.
I guess the only thing that I could say that maybe is that there could be some more flexibility. Because in Colorado, where we had to take our water right to court, but we could only change enough of our reservoir water right because anything more would have been speculation. So we could only change enough so that Public Service Company had that consumptive amount of water that they needed. But if we could have went in at the same time, changed all of our water and had a little more option or flexibility if we wanted to, then that would have been a little easier for us rather than changing a little bit and then next time we have to go back to court and we have to change a little bit more.
So this is the silly nature of the system, right? There's these huge transaction costs. There's a great saying in Colorado water law: engineer measure with micrometer, attorney mark with chalk, and judge cut with chainsaw. And within every portion of the way, there's an amazing amount of waste that goes on to get these transactions done. And that's why we don't have any kind of a real live market here other than Northern, which is a total outlier in the whole world, basically, with regard to how it operates with water.
So does the Wyoming system work better? I'll do a little aside here. I think, John, you're the one that was telling about this when Elwood Mead, right, whose Lake Mead is named after, he created the water regime here in Colorado, and that's based on you get a portion of water right, you own it, you're proud of it, you keep it, you don't let anybody else get at it, and then if you need to change it, you have to go to court. Well, Elwood Mead then moved on to Wyoming and wrote their water laws, and he said, I hate what I did in Colorado. I'm gonna do one that works this time, and that involves a much more flexible administrative system, but you don't have to litigate to get a change in it. And many other states emulated that. No other states emulated Colorado. So, I mean, that's a fascinating bit of Colorado lore. I think you should be proud of it. It's unique. But maybe that's what you're talking about changing is adding some flexibility. to that system.
Absolutely, and a more administratively focused system where the state engineer could do things without having to go to water court, I would argue would be a better thing.
Yeah, that makes me really nervous when administratively, because then you have one person that has the power. We look at our water right as our protection, and we look at our water court as a protection. At least you get to go state your case. You have a judge, albeit he might cut it with a chainsaw, but at least you have someone.
So these administrative systems, you have recourse to the courts. You don't like what the engineer does, you go to the court, just like you would have done originally, only in this case, you don't start there.
Okay, so people in the audience, be thinking of your questions. And firing line, I also gave the firing line probably an impossible assignment, but I'm going to ask you to be thinking of that was. And I said, each of you pick one person on the panel and ask a question of something that person has it within his power to do right away to improve the water system and situation in this state. And I didn't really poll the firing line to see if there were such questions, but I thought it was worth a try. So anyway, is there one more firing line question here?
I would like to add to the flexibility thing. There are a couple pieces of legislation out there in the legislature this year meeting with a certain amount of resistance on how the flexibility would work. We have one pilot program going on right now in Arkansas to try to go through more of an administrative process with the state engineer and the conservation board, can still be appealed to the water court. And so I think we're making small steps in the right direction. And then there's a proposal to give flexibility by going to the court, multiple end users for your water right. And again, the speculation concern has been raised. And so we certainly need to continue the conversation to get to a point that has less transactional costs, and then I think we can get more flexibility into it, and agriculture be more willing to consider that.
Would someone please, does everyone in the audience understand what the speculation concern is? Or anti-speculation? Would somebody just briefly explain what the sort of a moral clause?
Well, I'll touch on it. It began early on because they didn't want one person coming out and saying, I'm going to take all the water in the river today. I'm going to get a water right for all the water today. You had to actually put it to beneficial use. So you couldn't say, I'm going to ask for 2,000 cubic feet per second from the river at this point, and I might develop it 50 years from now. So that would have precluded anybody else from using it, and you had kind of you speculated on that piece of water, and you took it from the public in general. So that's where it arose out of. Mm-hmm. It's been kind of pushed so that when you change a water right, you already have a water right, but now when you change a water right, they call it speculation, even if you're changing it from agriculture to municipal. Unless you have an end user in mind at the time, then they call it speculation, which I think carries it even a little bit further beyond what it was originally intended.
And it makes markets really hard to do.
Can I ask one more question? John, you've got the mic. So, we heard from the dairy industry. We've heard from JBS. This state is about livestock feeding and dairy. If you look at its agriculture, right, 2/3 of the receipts are from the livestock sector. 80% of our irrigated lands go to grow corn, hay, silage. These are low-value products. We're talking about the pressures on ag, and meanwhile we've built this system that's based on livestock feeding and dairy in Colorado. What's the innovation that takes us to the future here? What happens to our livestock industry as these pressures increase on low-value crop production?
That's a good question. I'm reminded of a discussion we had several years ago when corn was $7.50 a bushel, and a friend of mine that's in the municipal water supply business commented, he said, we've never thought about what $12 corn would do to our ability to go to agriculture and buy water. Because oftentimes, it's been a market there that when municipals needed water, they knew they could go to ag and buy it somewhere by raising the price a little bit. So I think we need a profitable agriculture, and we can have that through technology and innovation to make a drop of water go further, produce more. There's a limit to that. And so as long as we have profitability in agriculture, I think agriculture will be somewhat resistant to just sell out. They might lease the water on a temporary basis. And so that's why we're looking at some of these flex markets and some of these alternatives, transfer methodologies that we talk about, ATMs. It's a terrible acronym. But anyway, that's what it is. It's alternatives to the buy and dry, or just selling it out and going elsewhere. And so I think that will become a factor. It'll help or keep the prices of commodities up. And that's one of our selling cards on production agriculture in Colorado, and meat production, because we've got a great climate, we've got available water, and we've got affordable inputs.
Okay, a question, anybody? I see a hand back over here.
In economics, in the study of economics, we're taught that as a resource becomes scarce, it moves to its highest use. And I wonder if you have an idea if in the future the amount of agricultural land that's purposed for biofuels will be seen as a lesser use and may not get that water for that purpose. And then also, is the ag industry doing anything to educate people on why this water, in an agricultural sense, is at its highest use? Or in other words, selling ag water to people.
I've had this discussion numerous times. We are market-driven in the sense on why farmers produce hay, why they produce corn, because that's probably the most profitable market for them. And if we want to change that, then the market needs to tell them that you need to go to vegetables. Rob Sakata just threw one at me. No, and so it really becomes an economic decision on the part of that irrigation agriculturalist on what he can produce most economically. And corn, hay is the predominant market right now. Until there's other markets or market forces that cause them to move away from that and away from meat production, which I don't think will happen in the next century. But those are some things that those farmers are, they're not locked into producing corn forever. They're producing the commodity that gives them the best return. And I forgot the other part of the question.
The biofuel.
The biofuels. Again, I think this was market-driven. When the price of commodities got so low, certain people in the agriculture business said, is there an alternative market? And biofuels, corn ethanol, actually was that alternative to selling it below the cost of production. And so, again, it was a market-driven type of thing. $100 crude had a lot to do with the success of it. $50 crude, they're re-questioning that. But I've been a proponent of biofuels because my grandfather devoted over 30% of his farm to biofuels. It was called horse feed because that was his horsepower. Didn't come from an engine, it came from real horses. And so we've done that before. We've raised our own energy. And so we have to look at that. We're still the cheapest fed nation in the world, even with one of the most robust ethanol markets and biofuel industries. And I think we've seen the advantage of being a leader on the global scene of producing as much of our own energy as we can, whether it's the fossil fuel or renewable fuels. We've had a real impact on our own economy and the world energy supply.
Okay, I hear that there's a, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to ask, I guess, all of you, if you had the ability and there was one thing you could change about Colorado water as it affects the future of agriculture in Colorado, what would that be?
Okay, we'll start at this end.
I'd change the quantity.
From your mouth to God's ears.
Do we have any water lawyers in the room? What's the old Shakespeare saying? Kill all the lawyers?
Okay. Zach, what do you think?
Changing use patterns in industrial and processed water to focus on efficiency and not valuing. I guess it's not valued to the right dollar amount and putting more of an actual financial value on water resources.
David.
Measure all ag water use accurately.
I think the paradigm shift I'm looking for is more reuse. So I don't think we do a good job with that yet. And that specifically ties into water quality as well. So not only quantity, but quality.
I can't add anything to that.
Well done. Another killer question over here. Anybody? Okay. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, just a
I'll
comment.
come back to the front in a minute.
Oh yeah, somebody just said, uh-oh, that's not a good sign. First of all, thank you all for coming. I mean, what an intelligent group of people on water. My question is, how do you bring the consumer into your conversation? I know that John has been working hard to take this water plan around the state, and it's been not probably as widely attended as I think they'd like in the diversity of people that need to understand this. The reason for the study that Dr. Graff and I did was because agriculture wasn't mentioned first once as you asked for an economic driver. The second part of that is water was only mentioned twice in 64 counties. So how do you get the consumer so that as each of you is making a change in this system, they become part of your partner? How do you do that knowing that that consumer needs to understand the complexity of the intelligent body that you all have up there?
There's very few ag organizations that don't have some kind of a public outreach, and very few that don't have some kind of a water committee now. And so I think it shows how ag groups are evolving. We have Colorado Agriculture Water Alliance, consortium of those ag organizations that deal with water. Public outreach is certainly a concern, Cathay, and I have a theory in that I've been going to a lot of these meetings, and when we go to the rural areas, folks come out in a higher percentage of the numbers in that community to talk about the water plan and the planning that goes into it. I was recently at an urban setting, and I think we had a handful of people show up. And so we got to talking about that, and a lot of them have more of a direct connection with their utility, and that they get a bill once a month. They tell them how much they're using, and they have had some pretty good subliminal type of education efforts on the part of the large citizenry. And so I think they have a certain level of confidence in their water supplier, that they have affordable, wholesome, reliable water supplies. And so that's the only thing I attribute to the low turnout in the urban setting on a proportional basis. But we have a lot of things going. It's a never-ending educational thing. As you well know, even within our leaders in the rural areas, the county commissioners, some of them are very involved, some of them are not as involved. The one thing I like about the IBCC and the roundtable, they're all public meetings. Some people do come to listen and just observe the public process, but there is a certain level of confidence, I think, in those people. If you send a Jim Yon to the IBCC, I don't have to go to that meeting because I have confidence in Jim or Steve Smith or whoever might go to represent my area. And so I'm not sure we'll ever get to the masses, but we want to get to the people that those people have confidence in. And so that's what I think our goal is with the water plan. We've publicized it, it's online. You can get it a number of different ways, but it's to have the confidence in this ground up, this roundtable process, so people, even though they weren't able to go to the meetings, they know who was there and they have some confidence in their wisdom.
Okay, well, I'm afraid we're out of time. We'll take one more question. All right, that was convincing.
Yes, I was just curious what we can do to incentivize water conservation. I market a product that only costs $5 an acre. It can be applied at 15 ounces to an acre. It can cut back the applied amount of water to grow corn crop, for instance, by as much as 30 to 40%. And I have reason to think that if the farmers in Gilchrist area would do that, we'd have more water going down to Sterling that those farmers would be able to use that claim they need their senior water rights. And so how do we incentivize and get farmers to adopt more technologies, including buying products like mine, to incentivize and redistribute where that water goes and make sure that some that do feel they have senior water rights are getting access to those waters that they feel they deserve and are entitled to?
This is the beauty of markets, right? If you allow people to monetize, it's the beauty of markets. If you allow people to monetize their water and then decide what they want, what portion they want to utilize and what portion maybe makes more sense to provide for somebody else, then you've got this beautiful thing that Adam Smith and you know, economic theory since the 18th or 17th centuries has told us we trade when we want to maximize value. We trade.
The only thing you want to keep in mind is that we depend on some of that deep percolation or what some people would term waste, like David said, for our water right downstream. So just because you maybe use less in one place, eventually it has an effect. Just like David said, in one area, because you didn't have these return flows, farmers conserved so much that then there wasn't water downstream. Because the South Platte River, I just know the Platte. I've been through the roundtable process, I've learned about the other systems, but the South Platte used to dry up at Fort Morgan. And if you do that so efficiently, that's what will happen again. So you have to keep in mind that, you know, we depend on that deep percolation to make the river whole, to make it a constant stream like it has been for the last 100 years.
Okay, well, John, David, Zach, Brad, firing line experts, Reagan, Jim, Tim, Steve, thank you so much. As I said, we only could scratch the surface, but it's been a very informative discussion. Thank you.